Hey guys, Pro171, and today we're going to talk about classic Who villains in modern Who. And do you think that the modern series is watering down the threat of classic Who villains, so to speak? Because a lot of the classic Who villains, to me, they kind of lose their edge in the modern series over time. A lot of this is down to the fact they get overused a lot. The Daleks, for example. I liked how... I was about to say Classic Who uses them sparingly. That's not always the case. Classic Who's weird. Like, we'll get a bunch of them, and then a gap, and then a bunch of them, and then a gap. You know, the first Doctor had several Dalek stories. And then Patrick had two his first season. Excuse me. But after that, there's like a 5-year gap between Evil of the Daleks and Day of the Daleks. A 5-year gap with no Daleks. Now, then, of course, we got one a year for a few years. John had 3, and then Tom's first season had Genesis. So we got about 4 stories in a 4-year period. But then there's another gap between Genesis and Destiny. About another 4-year gap. 75 to 79? And then in another 4-year gap before we got Resurrection. And in the 80s, the 9 or 10 seasons we had in the 80s, we only have 3 Dalek stories? 3. And they're all considered good. Like the 80s Dalek. Say what you want about 80s Doctor Who. I know a lot of people crap on the Davison era, the Colin Baker era, and the Sylvester McCoy era. But it's pretty much universally accepted that all 3 of the Dalek stories are good. And part of the reason is because there's not a lot of them. So when they do them, they make them awesome. Imagine if there had been like 8 Dalek stories in the 80s. Do you think they'd all be like top of the line awesome? Probably not. Same thing with the Cybermen. The Cybermen would take breaks. Now, we did get the Cybermen a lot, in seasons 4, 5, and 6. A lot of Cybermen. But then you think about it, there's a huge break before we get them in Revenge of the Cybermen. We don't see them from, 1968 to 69. 69, I think. Yeah, 69 when Invasion came out. All the way to, 75. It's like a 5 or 6 year period. No Cybermen. And then after Revenge of the Cybermen, we don't get them again until Earthshock. One of the reasons I think Earthshock works so well is because that cliffhanger at episode 1 where it reveals the Cybermen is so good. And one of the reasons it's so good is because you have not seen them in 8 years? Is that right? 8 years? Earthshock? No, that's not right. That's not right. 82... What was Earthshock? I can't remember if Earthshock's 82 or 83. But if it's 83, 8 years. Let's go with that. 8 years. So imagine them doing that now. Can you imagine them doing that now, not using them for 7 or 8 years? Would never happen. Would never happen. And that's part of the problem, is that the Cybermen, just in the modern show, they get used too much, and they don't get used effectively. Now, when they first brought them back, that 2-parter Age of Steel, really good. Love that. I think that's the best story the Cybermen have had in modern Who. Them originating from a parallel universe is really good. I like the origin story being on Earth. It also does a good job of explaining why they look so drastically different from the classic series Cybermen, because they are from a parallel Earth. I enjoyed them in that. I like them in the Series 2 finale, even though they get beat up by the Daleks, because it's such a twist, you don't see it coming at part 1. So to see a Cybermen story basically turn into a Dalek story, I think that's a really neat concept and works as a one-off, so I enjoyed that. It's kind of after that they start going downhill. Like Closing Time to me started off pretty good and then ended crappy. Nightmare in Silver wasn't really that good. And then after that they just kept playing second fiddle to the Master and stuff. I really liked what they were doing with them in Series 12 with the Haunting of Villa Duda Dee Da Day or whatever. And I liked Ascension of the Cybermen. It looked like we were getting a good Cyberman story before Timeless Children crapped all over it and made them, second fiddle to the Master again. The Cybermen get used too much in the modern series. They don't need to come back every season or every other season or every third season. Give them a rest and then give them a good story so you'll have maximum impact with, say, like a story called Earthshock. That could work better. The Daleks. I know the Daleks are kind of obligated to appear once a season. Make it a one little background note if you have to. Because the Daleks do get to where they don't really feel threatening anymore. is while they have bona fide classics in the modern series like Dalek, The Parting of the Ways, again the series 2-parter as well, they're pretty threatening. I actually like Victory of the Daleks. The more I think about it, the more I like it. Victory of the Daleks I think is underrated because while the World War II planes and space thing is really stupid, and that kind of takes me out of it. The rest of it I like because how often do we have a Dalek story where the Daleks win? How often do you have a story with the Daleks where the Daleks are better off at the end of the story than they were at the beginning of the story? Has it ever happened in Doctor Who besides Victory of the Daleks? Ever? So Victory of the Daleks, they're here, and by the end of it, they're here. They got exactly what they wanted. They tricked the Doctor. They conned the Doctor. They outsmarted the Doctor. And so it gets points for me for that originality. So while on one hand it's an inferior version of Power, its ending is really good, the Daleks win, it is aptly named Victory of the Daleks. And so I actually do like that one. And then they show up in that one little scene, I think in Series 6, when one of them's almost dying and it looks up and sees the Doctor. Then we have Asylum of the Daleks, which doesn't really make a lot of sense, but it's silly fun. Into the Dalek, I like more than I used to. Then you have the 2-parter in Series 9, which is awful and my least favorite Dalek story. I don't think they were in Series 10. Resolution was alright. Revolution of the Daleks I liked. It's not super great, but I liked it. Of course, Evolution was the Manhattan 2-parter. I used to like more than I do now. I'm kind of on it now. And then, to me, Journey's End. I know a lot of people love the Journey's End 2-parter at Series 4. It feels too much to me, though. It feels overblown. It seems like Russell T. Davies had this bad habit of wanting to top himself with each series finale. It's like, Series 1, we did this. We got to top that for Series 2. Oh, now I got to top that for Series 3. Now I got to top that for Series 4. Everything kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And because of this, the Stolen Earth Journey's End 2-parter just feels like too much. So while I like it, I don't like it as much as some people like it. And of course, what little bit they were in Day of the Doctor, they were good. But again, I like how the Daleks were used more sparingly in Classic Who. And I think that would work better here. If they took like a 5-year break. Now, that being said, social media is drastically different now. Television viewing is so much different now than it was during Classic Who's era, and even from what it was when the modern show started in 2005. It would be harder to take that kind of a break. 5 years without the Daleks, you're going to have people online. I want the Daleks. I want the Daleks. I want the Daleks. I want the Daleks. I want the... it's like that old Bugs Bunny cartoon. I want an Easter egg. I want an Easter egg. I want an Easter egg. People are going to be like, where are the Daleks? We want the Daleks. I want the Daleks. We want the Daleks. We want the Daleks. There's going to be a lot of people like that. We want more. We want it now. We want it immediately. I think that's one of the reasons why television itself is done at such a faster pace now than it was in Classic Who's time. So it would be harder to rest these characters now, the Cybermen, the Master, the Daleks. It would be harder to rest them now. I'll admit that. But I think the show would benefit from that. I'll come back around to that point in a minute. The Master, I think, has been handled pretty well. I'm not as keen on the unhinged Master like John Sims and Sasha tend to do. I like them, but I much prefer the way Derek Jacobi plays it when he's the Master briefly. I love that. That's perfect. And I like Missy a lot, even though she has the unhinged thing going on. I really love Missy. Michelle Gomez is great. I do think Missy's been done pretty well. I kind of wish they hadn't brought the Master back so fast after Missy because it does raise so many questions. But Sasha's Master is great, so I do enjoy watching him. But I would like to see... I wouldn't mind the Master probably being in Series 13 maybe, but I would like a little bit of a break from him after that. Maybe just 3 years. Give me 3 years off from the Master and I'd be good. Because I do think he's been written pretty well. Now, some of the Classic Who villains have been done really well in the modern series. And the examples I think of immediately are the Ice Warriors and the Autons. But I think one of the reasons they've been done so well is because they haven't been used much. They've been used very sparingly. The Autons have only been in 2 stories, both of which are great, including Rose. And then the Ice Warriors, which have also been used in 2 stories, which are both great. And I think one of the reasons this works is we only get them occasionally. This is what they need to do with more Classic Who villains, or even some of the modern Who villains that show up too often. Hello, Weeping Angels. Even in Classic Who, the Ice Warriors didn't show up a lot. We got them in the Ice Warriors. We got them in Seeds of Death. And then I believe they were in the Peladon stories. And that's really it. And the last time we saw them in Classic Who, I think, was Monsters of Peladon? So that's a huge break there, which I like. And then, like I said, there are 2 stories in Modern Who have been good. The Great Intelligence, another good example. I think he's really good in Series 7 when we get him. Again, he's used sparingly. Plus, the fact Richard E. Grant is just awesome in that role. If there's one thing I've learned from Loki is that Richard E. Grant's just awesome in general. I liked Loki. I thought it was a good show. My favorite scene in that whole show was watching Richard E. Grant be a badass. Oh, yes, that was a wonderful scene. So I like Richard E. Grant. I really need to watch Scream of Shaka. I've never seen it, but I really need to watch it because I'm willing to bet he's great as the Doctor in it. But The Great Intelligence. I haven't seen Abominable Snowmen, but I really like Abominable Snowmen. Hey, I got it right. I've actually seen Web of Fear, really liked it, but I liked his take on it in the modern series as well. Another thing is, the Sontarans is another example of villains that have been screwed over in the modern show, by the way. I didn't bring that up. The Sontarans in the classic series were a threat. I haven't seen the Time Warrior, but I'm assuming in the Time Warrior, it seems to be held in pretty high regard. They're a threat. In Sontaran Experiment, the one there is a threat. He does a good job. Stahl, or whatever his name is, he does a good job. In The Two Doctors, the Sontaran is a threat. He's a menace. In The Invasion of Time, the Sontarans invade Gallifrey and almost take it over. Gallifrey! They almost beat the Time Lords. Obviously, these guys are dangerous. And then you get the new series, which that 2-parter that started out with them, the Sontaran Stratagem and the Poison Sky, does them really well. Really liked them in that story. Didn't really care for the Saltar Hot thing, but I liked how they were characterized in that story. It was very classic Who-like. But then Strax came, and now they're the comic relief. Comic relief. Oh, there's a Sontaran. Comic relief. They're the snarf of Doctor Who. And this not only hurts them in the modern show, but if somebody goes back and watches the Sontaran Experiment or the Time Warrior, they might take one look at them and go, it's Strax. It's classic series Strax. All right, boys, get ready to laugh. And so you hurt the integrity of those classic stories by that. So I really need the Sontarans, since supposedly they're coming back in Series 13. Chibnall, don't let me down on this, dear Lord, asking for miracles. Just make them awesome like they used to be in Classic Who. Give me that, and I will give Chibnall some points right there. Here's another thing, though. It's not just the classic villains this happens to. Some of the new series, New Who, you'll notice I don't call it that. I call it the modern series, because it's been around since 2005. 16 years ago at the recording of this video. New Who is old now. Not like old, but it's not like brand spanking new. You wouldn't call a 2005 Toyota Camry new, would you? Even some of these villains have been overdone, especially the Weeping Angels. Like, imagine if the Weeping Angels were like Sutekh in Pyramids of Mars. I love Pyramids of Mars. I love Sutekh because he's probably the best one-off villain Doctor Who's ever had. I love him, and I don't want him to bring it back, so I'm worried they'll ruin him. Morbius, another great example. Like, I wouldn't mind Morbius coming back, but it's a double-edged sword bringing someone like Morbius back. Because on one hand, it's Morbius, and Brandon Morbius is amazing. On the other hand, do you really think Chris Chibnall can write a Doctor Who story as good as The Brain of Morbius? A season 13 story, one of the best seasons in all of Doctor Who's history? Do you really think Chris Chibnall could do something with that? I don't have that kind of faith. So I'm worried if they did bring Morbius back, they would ruin him, or they would shove some kind of leftist agenda into him, or some kind of box they have to tick. Morbius would probably be female, or which, again, Morbius is a Time Lord. Technically, you could make that work, but I just know there are too many people, as soon as it was announced, it would be like, So it's a double-edged sword. My main thing, coming back to the point I said earlier, talking about Doctor Who villains, instead of picking old villains like the Weeping Angels and bringing them back, because the Weeping Angels, again, imagine if Blink had been done by itself and the Weeping Angels had never come back. They were just a one-off story, and that's the only story they were ever in. The Weeping Angels could possibly be the best Doctor Who villain ever, even beating out the Daleks. So that's just such an amazing concept. I love Blink because it's such a nice concept. You're taking something ordinary like a statue and making it deadly. It's one of the reasons why the Vashta Nerada works so well. is because the Vashta Nerada are only in that library two-parter. And it's such a good idea that something living in the shadows gets you. Not every shadow, but any shadow. It's a fascinating concept. Piranhas in the air. And I wouldn't want them to come back because it could hurt the integrity of that episode. Now, personally, I didn't mind the Angels coming back in the two-parter in Series 5, The Flesh and Stone Time of Angels. I do like that one. I don't really like the scene where they start moving. It kind of loses me there. But overall, I actually like that two-parter. I would have been fine with them coming back for that and not coming back again. But then they just started showing up in little scenes like Time of the Doctor, you know, when that little scene when they grab them in the snow doesn't need to be there. Or in Hell Bent when they're down in the little pit moving around, don't need to be there. Or in Revolution of the Daleks when one of them's in the cell with the Doctor. You know, it waters them down. Their integrity gets watered down. It's like, imagine you have a soda pop you like say Dr. Pepper. You really like Dr. Pepper, but you've only got a 1 liter of Dr. Pepper that's got to get you through the week. So you think, you know what? I'm going to pour this Dr. Pepper into a bottle or into a jug, and then I'm going to fill that jug up with water, and then I'm going to pour it into half of that into another jug and fill both of them up with water, and I've turned this 1 liter bottle into like 4 jugs of watered down Dr. Pepper. That watered down Dr. Pepper is going to taste like crap, all of it. Yeah, you got more Dr. Pepper. Instead of having 1 liter of Dr. Pepper, you have 4 gallons of very watered down Dr. Pepper. Personally, I'd rather just have my 1 liter of Dr. Pepper. I don't want to drink the watered down. And it's the same way here, you know. If you have a really good villain and you do like one-off story with them like Blink, it's amazing. But the more you give them these substandard stories or just these little cameo appearances, the more you water down their badassery, so to speak. The more you water down their integrity. Does anyone really... I mean, Blink is still a great episode, but for the most part, do you think that the Weeping Angels are like the badasses you thought they were in 2007 or 2010? So here is my thing. I think that they should focus on making new villains that are going to be classic villains. Because, you know, at this point, even some of the modern series villains have achieved that kind of classic status. Like, again, the Weeping Angels, the Vashta Nerada. They're kind of classic villains. Even though they're modern series villains, they become classics. You know, focus on making more of those, more villains that people are going to remember, that are part of, you know, when people are talking about what are some of the best villains in Doctor Who, that's one that's on the list. Because my thing is, if you're a showrunner and you have to have old villains brought back to make Doctor Who work, then you don't need to be running Doctor Who. Doctor Who is such an amazing concept, more than any other television show in history. It can change, you can do any genre in it, you can set it in any time, on any planet. The possibilities are practically limitless for what you can do in Doctor Who. You should be able to come up with all sorts of unique and interesting characters and villains, so you shouldn't have to rely on these established popular ones all the time. Instead, focus on making new ones that people are going to remember 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and then they're going to be like, man, how come we haven't seen da-da-da-da-da from Series 14? They were amazing. We haven't had them in like 3 years. We need to get them back on. Something like that. That's what I think. So yeah, this has been just kind of a rant on that. I really do wish Doctor Who would stop relying so much on classic villains, and especially stop overdoing classic villains like the Cybermen and the Daleks, and focus on creating, and the Weeping Angels, and focus on creating new memorable villains that people actually want to see and will be interested in. So that's my thoughts on that very long rant. I guess that about sums that up. What do you think of the video? Comment down below and let me know what you think. Other things to do, click the like button, click the subscribe button, click the bell for notifications, so you never miss out on a new video. I do have a Patreon as well. There is a link to that down in the description. If you like what I do and want to support what I do, check that out. My entry-level tier is only $2 a month, but I have higher tiers as well that include video requests and stuff like that. If you have a video you'd like me to do, go ahead and become one of my patrons, and I'll be glad to get that up for you. Everyone who joins at any tier level gets a free video request. Most importantly, though, stay safe out there, and thank you for watching.